I'm Natalie Hayes, 29 years old, and the night my brother raised his glass in front of 200 people to declare my company a failure. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just walked out of the ballroom while champagne flutes clinked behind me. That moment didn't break me, but it reminded me exactly where I stood in my family. The Stanford dropout, the one with delusions of innovation. What no one there knew, what even my father hadn't bothered to ask, was that my so-called failing company had just crossed a $99 million valuation. And by the next morning, everything was going to change. Before I go any further, drop a comment to tell me where you're listening from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had someone underestimate your worth. Let me take you back for a second. I grew up in a house where achievement was currency, and my brother Bradley had an endless bank account. He did everything right, captain of the debate team, straight A student, full ride to Harvard. Our father Lawrence built Hayes Consulting from the ground up and expected us to carry the torch. And Bradley, he carried it like it was made for his hand. But my mother Victoria, she saw something different in me. She was the kind of woman who believed in quiet brilliance. She never cared much for titles or Ivy League credentials. What she did care about was curiosity, creativity, and character. I still remember sitting with her in the garage at 13 soldering wires onto a clunky circuit board while she whispered, "Innovation doesn't follow a syllabus." I lived for those weekends with her tinkering and troubleshooting while my brother polished his speeches and practiced handshakes with Dad. When she died suddenly during my sophomore year at Stanford, everything shifted. The lectures that once fascinated me started to feel sterile. I loved the concepts, but not the pace. The field was changing faster than the curriculum. While my classmates studied legacy code startups across the country, were rewriting the rules in real time. So I made the call. I dropped out. My father said I was throwing my future away. He said it so calmly, like he was stating a fact. "This impulsiveness is why you'll never succeed like your brother." But I'd already accepted a position at a small AI startup in Austin, working nights and weekends just to learn the edges of what was possible. That job turned into a calling. 6 years later, I'm the founder and CEO of Novatech, an AI solutions company that specializes in adaptive virtual assistant technology. 47 employees, industry praise, and a CTO who's been with me since day one. That morning, Marcus, my CTO, walked into my office grinning like he had a secret. "Q3's in," he said. "We're up 22% from last quarter." Henderson's rollout blew projections out of the water. I tried to act cool, but I couldn't help it. I smiled. A real one. I'd built something that worked. Something that mattered. Then my phone rang. It was my father. "You haven't forgotten about Bradley's promotion party tonight, have you?" I hadn't remembered it either. He was being named the youngest vice president in the firm's history, and of course there was a black tie event to celebrate. "Wear something appropriate this time," he added, like I'd shown up in pajamas last time. I bit my tongue. I'd wear the navy Stella McCartney dress I'd saved for something special. Rachel, my best friend since high school, and Novatech's head of marketing poked her head in as I hung up. "You know they'll spend the whole night pretending you're still playing with wires in a basement." I shrugged. I'm used to it. But Rachel wasn't having it. That's the problem. You shouldn't be. That night, I slipped on the navy dress and my mother's sapphire earrings, tiny reminders of the one person who never made me feel like a disappointment. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see a dropout anymore. I saw a woman who built a company from scratch, a woman who had nothing to prove but still wanted her family to see her. When I pulled up to the Hayes estate, towering columns, glowing chandeliers, valet lines curling around the driveway, I reminded myself I belong in this room, even if no one there thinks so. But I should have known. That night wasn't just a celebration. It was a setup. And by the time Bradley stood up to speak, I already knew something was coming, I just didn't know how far he'd go. The ballroom doors hadn't even shut behind me when I heard my father's voice over the crowd. To Bradley Hayes, who proves that discipline, tradition, and the right education are still the surest path to success. The room echoed with the sound of crystal glasses tapping soft applause and murmurs of approval. I was already halfway to my seat, steadying my steps, holding on to the practiced smile I'd worn through 100 family events. I nodded politely at a cousin I barely knew, took my place beside a former client of my father's, and reached for the champagne flute in front of me. Bradley rose from the head table, his posture as polished as his cufflinks. "Thank you, Father, and thank you all for being here tonight." I braced myself. Many of you know my sister Natalie has been working on a tech venture since her early departure from Stanford. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. I glanced up. His eyes were on me. "What you may not know," he continued, "is that Novatech has been burning through capital at an unsustainable pace while failing to meet key delivery benchmarks." There was a pause. Not long, just enough for the tension to tighten across the room. "I feel a responsibility to help her exit gracefully before further embarrassment in the business community." Bradley lifted his glass slightly. "So tonight I'm publicly offering to acquire Novatech for 20% of its current valuation." I didn't move. I couldn't. The room had gone quiet, except for the faint clinking of a spoon dropped by someone too stunned to hide it. "Our team at Hayes Consulting is ready to absorb any viable technology," he said smoothly, "and to ensure Natalie has a secure transition out of what has unfortunately become a cautionary tale." My father, standing beside him, turned to the crowd. "Very generous, son. The family takes care of its own." I laid my napkin beside my untouched plate, stood, and walked straight out of the ballroom. No one called after me. No one followed. By the next morning, I was sitting in Novatech's break room, hands wrapped around a too-hot mug of coffee, trying to shake off the night. "It doesn't matter what they say," I told Rachel, who was leaning against the counter watching me. "Bradley can run his mouth at country clubs all he wants. Our numbers speak for themselves." Rachel didn't say anything right away. "3 of our biggest investors pulled out this morning," Marcus said quietly, stepping into the room. "Redstone Venture, Northwest Sullivan Investments, all gone." I looked up. What they cited, concerns about stability, said they heard from family sources. My brother's face flashed in my mind. The smirk, the toast. "And they're listening," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Because he's got the name. Harvard. Dad. And I'm just the dropout." The phone on the wall buzzed. Olivia, my assistant, poked her head in. "Diana Wells on line 1. I hit the speaker button. "Natalie, what is going on?" Diana's voice was sharp-clipped. "I've had 3 calls asking if Novatech is circling the drain." "What happened?" I explained. "The party. The speech. The fallout." She sighed, long and tired. "You need to understand something. In tech, perception is reality. If people believe you're failing, you are, whether it's true or not." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. "Hold the line," I told Olivia. "Team meeting in 30 minutes. At 10 a.m., I stood in front of our staff, developers, analysts, interns, engineers. I talked through the Westfield opportunity, emphasized the positive metrics, downplayed the family drama. I said we were solid, focused, growing. As the room cleared, Olivia came back in. "Eric Sullivan is here. He's in the lobby." Sullivan. The same investor who just pulled out, I told her to send him in. He walked in carrying a folder, his face unreadable. "I've always respected your vision, Natalie," he began, "but I'm hearing concerning things." "From my brother?" I asked. He hesitated. "Among others. He has no access to our numbers," I said. "What exactly is he telling you? That your cash runway is under 6 months? That there's no clear path to profitability?" I turned my monitor toward him, pulled up the dashboard. 18 months. Without the Westfield deal. He looked, nodded. This looks better than I expected, but rumors stick. And you're pulling funding based on that? He didn't answer the question directly. He left with a promise to reevaluate. An hour later, my phone rang again. It was Westfield. Thomas Bennett, their lead exec, had questions. We've heard chatter, he said, about Novatech's ability to deliver. I spent 20 minutes walking him through our systems. He sounded reassured, mostly, but he said the board would need more time. That afternoon I received a letter, formal, cold, signed by Hayes Consulting. It was an acquisition offer, 22% of our valuation, dated the day before Bradley's speech. I stared at it, unable to move. He'd planned this, all of it. That night back at my apartment, I threw a family photo across the room. The glass shattered a sharp sound against the hardwood floor. Rachel picked up the pieces. Feel better? No. My phone buzzed again. A text from Marcus. Found something. Coming over. 20 minutes. When he arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept either. Zenith Global signed an $80 million contract with Hayes Consulting 6 months ago, he said, opening his laptop. So the contract is for AI logistics management. They don't have the tech, but the specs. He turned the screen. They're identical to our Westfield proposal. I stared at it. They sold our capabilities before they even made an offer. Marcus nodded. They need our software to deliver. Without it, they default. He didn't have to say anything more. Bradley wasn't trying to sabotage Novatech because I was competition. He was doing it because I was the solution to his crisis. And now, he was running out of time. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at the office, sitting in the quiet glow of my monitor, watching a dozen lines of code scroll past without really seeing them. By morning, the silence in the office felt heavier than usual. Olivia left a fresh cup of coffee on my desk without saying a word. When I took a sip, it was cold. I hadn't noticed the time pass. Marcus stepped in just after 800. First National called. They're reevaluating our credit line. Said it's a sector-wide risk reassessment. Was that before or after Hayes Consulting reached out to them, I asked. He didn't answer. I grabbed my coat and drove straight to my father's office. The receptionist looked up from her desk, but didn't try to stop me. I knew the layout by heart, same paneled walls, same scent of leather and floor polish. He didn't look up when I stepped in. Natalie, he said, I assume this isn't a social call. You're helping Bradley tear down everything I've built. He set his pen down. Bradley is preserving family interests. No, Bradley is salvaging a contract he can't deliver because he sold technology he doesn't have. He met my eyes then. We're offering a graceful exit. That's more than most competitors get. I didn't sit. I wasn't going to give him the comfort of that power dynamic. You're trying to buy me out for a quarter of what this company's worth, while you whisper in the ears of every investor, partner, and bank that we're unstable. His voice didn't rise. Traditional leadership recognizes when guidance is needed. Jessica Thompson got that same guidance offer, didn't she? A pause. She was impressed with the compensation package, he said. It was a clear message. If I didn't sell, they'd start pulling my team apart. Back at Novatech, Rachel was waiting in my office. Catherine Morgan from Data Minds just left. She made a soft offer. I sat down. Another one, they're all circling. I pulled up my inbox. A message from Garner Technologies had come in while I was gone. We're pausing discussions until further clarity on your internal stability can be confirmed. I called their CEO directly. Is this about our numbers, I asked? No, he said. Your team's output is top tier. Then why? There's chatter, concerns about leadership structure, consistency. I could hear it in his voice. He'd already made up his mind. I ended the call. I sat there for a long moment staring at the screen before Marcus stepped in again. We need to talk about the timeline. What's wrong now? The adaptive learning model. It's not scaling. The more data we push, the more unstable the outputs. I looked up. How long to fix it? He didn't answer right away. Could be days, could be weeks. That night we held an emergency team meeting. I tried to present calm, confident, but I could see it in their faces, the unease, the fatigue. One of our junior developers, Tyler, spoke up. My roommates at Linker Systems. They're expanding their AI division with big bonuses. Nobody said it, but I could feel the tension in the room. The next day I met Diana for lunch. You need a backup plan, she said. You think I should sell. I think you should preserve what matters. If there's a buyer who respects your work and your people, it's worth considering. That afternoon I started calling smaller investors. I pieced together enough to keep payroll steady. But the terms were bad, expensive, and temporary. Marcus came in just after I hung up the last call. Westfield wants another conversation. Let me guess. Bradley reached out to them too. Their VP had apparently expressed concerns about delivery confidence. The words barely felt real anymore. I didn't go home that night either. At 3 a.m., I sat alone in the conference room, lights dimmed, the only sound the soft hum of our servers. I pulled the framed photo of my mom from my desk, me at 12 beaming, beside a half-working robot we'd built together in the garage. She'd always told me I saw things differently, that it wasn't a weakness. But now, I didn't know if I had anything left. I'd promised her on her last night that I would build something that mattered. But what if this wasn't enough? By the time the sun rose, I was already dressed for my doctor's appointment. Rachel had booked it, and I hadn't had the energy to argue. Dr. Chen frowned as she read my chart. 8 pounds down, elevated blood pressure. How much sleep are you getting? Enough, I said. She looked at me. 3 hours, maybe 4. Natalie, this isn't sustainable. Your immune system, your heart, your brain, all of it is under pressure. She wrote a prescription. Light sleep aid, instructions to eat, rest. I nodded, took the paper, didn't say if I'd use it. Back at the office, Marcus was waiting. Jessica just resigned. So did Greg and Michelle. All 3 critical engineers. Gone. Hayes Consulting, I asked. Double salaries, signing bonuses, guaranteed contracts. I sat down. They're not even hiding it anymore. By the time we met with Alexander Mitchell that evening for the new demo, the system crashed within minutes. He stayed polite, professional. I know innovation is messy, he said, but I could feel the weight of it in the room. The clock was ticking and we were out of grace. After he left, I ended up in the server room, staring at blinking lights, hoping one of them would give me an answer. Rachel found me there. You can't keep this up, she said. I'm fine. You're not fine, and we can all see it. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. What if Bradley wins? I whispered. What if everything I've built just disappears? Rachel sat beside me quiet for a moment. Then you rebuild it, or something better, but you don't give it away. The next morning a letter came, heavy stationery, my father's handwriting. Natalie. The family believes there is still a path forward. Your mother would have wanted peace. Bradley's offer is sound. Accept it, and we can move on together. It was signed simply, Dad. I placed it in the drawer without reading it again. At 10:30, I walked into the lobby and saw Bradley sitting there. I wanted to see how my investment is doing, he said, while you still have some leverage left. The offer had dropped again now to 25%. The smirk on his face said he thought he'd already won. He stood to leave. Think it over, Nat, before the door closes completely. I waited until the office cleared out that evening. I sat alone at my desk with the letter in one hand and my phone in the other. Bradley's number glowed on the screen. All I had to do was call. Just one conversation, and I could make the pressure stop. I was still sitting there alone in the office when the knock came at the door. It was just past 7. Most of the team had gone home. I hadn't turned the lights off yet, but the building had that late evening stillness, the kind where every sound carries. I called out without looking up. "We're closed. It's Isabella." I looked toward the door. She stepped inside slowly, one hand gripping her purse like she was holding something breakable. She wasn't wearing her usual sleek heels or structured coat, just jeans, a soft sweater, and her hair pulled back like she hadn't bothered to fix it before leaving. Her face looked tight, like she hadn't slept. "Can I come in?" she asked. "I don't have much time." I nodded and moved aside so she could walk through. "Bradley thinks I'm at Pilates," she said. "I left my phone at the studio. He's not tracking me. Not yet." She sat across from me and opened her purse. Inside was a USB drive, a few printed documents folded in half. She placed them on the desk without saying anything. I looked down but didn't reach for them. "What is this internal financials? Emails, project notes, all from Hayes Consulting." She paused. "It's worse than you think." I didn't move, just waited. "They're not stable. The firm's bleeding money. The Zenith contract was supposed to fix it, but they can't deliver what they promised. They're weeks behind already." She gestured toward the documents. "Your tech, your AI engine is the only shot they have at holding that contract together. That's why Bradley's pushing so hard. He's not trying to rescue you. He's trying to keep Hayes Consulting from collapsing." I watched her, still unsure. "Why are you giving me this?" She took a breath. "Because I believed in them. I thought I was marrying into a family that stood for something. Legacy, integrity. But I can't watch this happen and pretend it's okay." She leaned forward. "My father built his business from the ground up. It wasn't perfect, but he always told me to do the right thing even when no one's watching." Her hands were still shaking. "I'm not proud of how long it took me to say something, but I'm saying it now. I didn't speak." She stood to leave. "Don't mention me. Don't hint at where this came from. Just use it." And with that, she walked out. I locked the door behind her. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later, followed by Marcus. I'd barely moved. The documents were still sitting where she'd left them. "Is this real?" I asked as Marcus flipped through the first few pages. His face tightened as he scanned the numbers. "They're deeper in the red than we thought," he said. "And look at this. Look at the timeline for Zenith's deliverables. They promised rollout in 9 months. They're 4 months in and haven't started back-end integration." Rachel leaned in. "They sold vaporware." Marcus opened the USB files. "This is the specs Doc Bradley submitted. These are your feature sets, our adaptive model, our speech mapping." Rachel looked at me. "He copied your proposal before he tried to buy you out." I didn't answer. I was already staring past them, thinking through the implications. "They need our tech," Marcus said. "Without it, they default on Zenith. Penalties like that, they might not recover." Just then, Marcus's phone buzzed. He read the message, eyes widening. "Elena fixed it," he said. "The adaptive model, the scaling issue. She found a bottleneck in the processor load. It's resolved." I turned to him. "It's stable?" He nodded. "And it's faster than we projected. How long to get it demo ready?" "By morning." I looked at Rachel. "Call Alexander. Tell him we have something to show him." The next 12 hours were a blur. Our engineers pushed through the night, testing, retesting. Marcus ran simulations. I rewrote our deck. Rachel finalized a briefing packet. By 9:00 a.m., the system was ready. Alexander arrived just before 10. No entourage, no assistant. Just a quiet nod as he stepped into the room. Marcus walked him through the demo. This time the system didn't stutter. It responded instantly, adjusting tone, phrasing, and logic in real time. The learning curve wasn't just responsive, it was predictive. Alexander leaned forward, watching closely. "This is beyond what I expected," he said. "You've solved contextual interpretation. Nobody's doing that at this level. I didn't bring up Hayes Consulting. I didn't mention Zenith. I just let him see what we'd built." After the session, he closed his laptop slowly. "I'd like to talk investment," he said. "Fair terms, based on your real valuation, not the narrative your competitors have been spreading." That afternoon, Diana came by. I walked her through everything Isabella's visit, the documents, the crash timeline at Hayes Consulting. She sat in my office, arms crossed, thinking. "They've been playing offense," she said. "It's time you did the same." I nodded. "We do it quietly," she added. "Not retaliation, strategy." That evening I called a company-wide meeting. I didn't sugarcoat anything. "There's been a coordinated effort to discredit us," I said. "It wasn't random. It wasn't market forces. It was planned. But we're not folding." I told them what we had, what we'd fixed, what we were preparing, and I gave them an out. If anyone needs to step away, I understand. There's no shame in it. No one moved. Kyle, one of our senior developers, raised his hand. "Jessica called me. She regrets leaving. Said it's chaos over there." A few others nodded. I looked around the room. We have a window, a short one, but enough, and we're going to take it. The next morning, an anonymous leak landed in a major industry publication. It didn't name Hayes Consulting, but it didn't need to. The wording made it clear a top-tier consulting firm had oversold its capabilities and was scrambling behind the scenes. The article spread fast. That afternoon, we invited Westfield's executive team to a private demo. Thomas Bennett brought 2 board members and their CTO. We kept the meeting focused, professional, nothing flashy. By the end of the hour, their CTO looked stunned. "This exceeds what we originally outlined." Thomas nodded. "We'll be revising the terms." I didn't react, just shook his hand. That night, back at my apartment, I opened a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was one of my mother's old notebooks. She used to sketch ideas, jot quotes, scribble thoughts when she couldn't sleep. I flipped through the pages until one caught my eye. The world doesn't need more followers. It needs people who build what others can't even see yet. I closed the journal and set it gently on the table. We weren't done yet. We kept the lights on late that week. Nobody asked to go home early. Nobody complained about the hours. The night after the Westfield demo, I walked into the development wing around 11 p.m. Half the team was still at their desks. Some were in sweats, some in socks, heads bent toward their screens, monitors glowing with lines of code and testing dashboards. Marcus stood in front of the whiteboard running numbers with Kyle and Beth. When he noticed me, he waved me over. "We're almost there," he said quietly. "Integration should finish by Friday if we don't hit snags." "How's Elena holding up?" I asked. "She hasn't left since lunch yesterday," he said, "but she says she's fine." I stepped into the center of the room and asked everyone to pause for a second. "I know these days have been long," I said. "I know you've been giving more than what's fair. I need 3 more days. And then no matter what happens, we take a breath." Someone clapped, then another. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. We got back to work. By Thursday, Rachel had prepped updated investor briefings. We adjusted our burn projections, new graphs, new positioning, everything reflecting the performance boost from the updated AI engine. We didn't talk about the pressure we were under. We just focused on the rollout. That evening, Alexander came in for a second visit. No briefing packet this time, just him and a quiet nod as we guided him through the improvements. The software responded instantly to customer service prompts adapted to emotional tone in real time and processed voice input from multiple users without delay. He didn't say much during the demo, just watched, measured, took a few notes on a yellow pad. Afterward, he stood with me near the window in the main conference room. The city stretched behind him, lit up in soft gold. "You've got something no one else has," he said. "And it's time to talk numbers." We scheduled the term sheet discussion for the following Monday. I stepped out into the hallway where Rachel was waiting with 2 coffees in hand. "Well?" she asked. I nodded. "It's happening." She handed me one of the cups. "I'll get Diana on the calendar." At home later that night, I let myself sit still for the first time in days, just for a minute. I found myself reaching for my mother's notebook again. This time I didn't skim. I read every word on the page. Don't confuse silence with weakness. Some of the strongest decisions are made in quiet. I closed the book gently and went to bed. In the morning, we got word from Westfield. The contract would move forward, but they wanted a final in-person confirmation meeting to review implementation timelines and ensure the executive board had no remaining doubts. I flew out with Marcus and Rachel the next day. We met in a quiet boardroom at Westfield's main campus, glass walls, tall windows, a long table polished to a mirror shine. Thomas Bennett opened the meeting. "We've been impressed," he said. "But some members of the board would like to hear directly from your team about delivery milestones and contingency planning." Marcus outlined the timeline. Rachel walked through customer onboarding projections. I took the final 10 minutes to explain how the adaptive learning algorithm would reduce call resolution time across all divisions. When we wrapped, the CTO leaned forward slightly. "Everything you're describing," he said, "would require a level of real-time processing we haven't seen from any of your competitors." "You're right," I said. "They don't have it." We left the meeting with a handshake and an agreement to finalize the revised contract within the week. On the plane ride back, Rachel leaned her head back and exhaled slowly. "That's done. For now," I said. She didn't argue. The next morning, I walked into the office just after 7:00. Olivia was already at her desk typing up the notes from the investor calls Rachel had fielded the night before. She looked up. "There's a package on your desk." I walked into my office and saw a small envelope, no return label, my name written in clean block lettering, inside a single printed page, a new article, this time from TechWire. Industry Insider's question. Hayes Consulting's technology claims, no mention of Novatech, but it quoted unnamed sources describing contract overreach, unrealistic timelines, and internal instability. By mid-afternoon, the story had picked up across 3 other outlets. Diana called just before 5. "You've changed the conversation," she said. "Now they're the ones scrambling." That evening, Bradley called. I let it ring once, then again. On the 3rd call, I picked up. "We should talk," he said. "Things have gotten complicated." I waited. Hayes. "Consulting is open to partnership," he said. "Not acquisition. We see value in a joint solution offering." His voice sounded calm, but I could hear the tightness behind the words. "I'll have Rachel look at my calendar," I said. He started to speak again, but I ended the call. In the morning, I met with Alexander and Diana to finalize the investment structure. By noon, we had a verbal agreement. Rachel ordered lunch for the whole office, a quiet celebration, no speeches. When I stood up to thank everyone, I didn't mention Bradley, or Hayes Consulting, or the battle we'd fought for the last 6 weeks. I just said, "You believed in something hard to explain, and you built it anyway. That's what makes this team different." That weekend, I took a walk alone through the neighborhood I'd grown up in, past the school where my mom had taught part-time, past the old park where she'd taught me to ride a bike on a Tuesday afternoon because we'd both decided it was more important than homework that day. I sat on one of the benches near the path, listening to the wind move through the trees. My phone buzzed once. I didn't look at it right away. When I did, it was Olivia. Call from Westfield Legal, contract ready to sign Monday, revised to include expanded integration. I put the phone back in my pocket and watched a pair of kids race past on scooters, laughing like they didn't care who was watching. It would be easy to say that moment felt like victory, but really it just felt quiet and right. The contract signing took place on a Monday morning. No press, no ribbon cutting. Just a quiet meeting in our main conference room with the Westfield legal team, their lead developer, and a few key members of our own. The agreement came in at $45,015,000, more than we originally projected. The revised terms included a faster rollout schedule and exclusive AI licensing for their full customer experience platform. Thomas Bennett stood after the last signature was made. "We're excited to move forward with Novatech," he said. "This solution is going to change the way we serve our clients." We shook hands, the papers were filed, and the room slowly cleared. Rachel closed her laptop, gave me a small nod, and stepped out to coordinate the announcement timeline. I stayed behind for a moment, just long enough to let it settle in. By Thursday, the first media feature landed. TechFuture ran a full-length article on our adaptive learning breakthrough. Headlines called it a new standard in AI communication, highlighting our emotional language processing and scalable architecture. Our phones didn't stop ringing. By the following week, Novatech's valuation had surged past $150 million. The same investors who once distanced themselves now wanted meetings. Venture firms who'd passed months ago suddenly wanted updates. Even those who'd believed Bradley's rumors were now asking to schedule demos. Rachel filtered the calls. Marcus focused on preparing the infrastructure for scale. Olivia began building a wait list of partnership inquiries. Then, on a Friday afternoon, my office phone rang. It was Bradley. "We should talk," he said. "The Westfield deal was impressive." I didn't respond. "We're prepared to explore a joint venture," he continued. "Hayes Consulting has a strong market presence. Novatech has the tech. There's opportunity here if we approach it strategically." I kept my voice neutral. "We'll review the terms when they're submitted in writing." There was a pause. "Things didn't have to get so messy," he added. I ended the call without answering. 3 days later, my father asked to meet. His assistant called to schedule it formally. No mention of family, just a name, a time, and a location. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. He was seated behind his desk when I walked in, reviewing something on a legal pad. He looked up as I entered, then motioned toward the chair across from him. "I've seen the Westfield rollout plan," he said. "The framework is innovative." I waited. Bradley showed me the specs, he added. "It's a strong solution." I gave a short nod. There was a pause before he spoke again. "I may have misjudged Novatech's viability." He didn't use the word apology, but it was the closest he'd ever come to one. He leaned back slightly. "Traditional models don't always apply in tech," he said. "Your mother saw that before I did." There was something in his voice, something I hadn't heard in a long time. Not warmth, but maybe perspective. "She always said your thinking was different," he added. I thought that meant unpredictable. I see now it meant valuable. We didn't talk long after that. I stood to leave, and he did too. "If you ever want to revisit the partnership discussions," he said quietly, "Hayes Consulting would still be interested." I nodded once. "I'll let Rachel know." That evening we held a team gathering in the office. Rachel transformed the main floor into something halfway between a company party and a tribute to our work. There were small posters showcasing each milestone we'd hit: our first client, our first investment, our first real product launch. Marcus received a quiet moment of recognition during the toast. To the people who stayed, I said, "Who worked when it was hard? Who built when things looked broken? You are Novatech." There wasn't loud cheering, just that steady kind of applause that means something. Alexander Mitchell came by toward the end of the evening. He didn't bring documents or numbers, just a bottle of good scotch and a simple congratulations. He stood next to me while I watched the team talk and laugh and fill the space with a kind of ease we hadn't had in months. "I knew you'd steady the ship," he said. Your technology caught my eye, but your clarity, that's what held my interest." I nodded. He paused, then added, "If you ever decide to take this further enterprise public offering, whatever comes next, let me know." I promised I would. 2 months later, I was invited to give the keynote at Tech Forward, the industry's leading innovation conference. Thousands of developers, engineers, investors, and researchers filled the auditorium. I walked on stage under bright lights, wearing a navy suit I hadn't needed approval for carrying only a few quiet memories and the opening slide of our journey. I didn't tell them about the betrayal, or the sabotage, or the offers that came dressed as lifelines. I told them how we'd built something no one believed in, how we learned to listen better, adjust faster, and stay clear even when the market wasn't. Innovation. I said doesn't always follow the expected route. Sometimes the most valuable thing you bring to the table is a different way of seeing the problem. The standing ovation lasted nearly a minute. Somewhere near the front row I saw my father, and next to him Bradley. Neither of them stood, but they were there, and that meant something. Not everything, but something. It took just 6 months after the Tech Forward keynote for Novatech's valuation to reach $250 million. The Westfield rollout had gone smoother than any of us expected. Their board signed off on a full integration across their customer support division, then came back a month later to expand it into logistics and billing. Their executive team called the improvement in client satisfaction measurable, immediate, and scalable. Enterprise clients started lining up. By spring, we had doubled in size. 78 employees, 3 offices, a wait list of Fortune 500 companies wanting implementation packages. Jessica Thompson came back first. She sent an email asking to catch up, then showed up at our office in person 2 days later with a resignation letter from Hayes Consulting already signed. Her first week back, she stayed late every night, even when we told her not to. "That place was all process," she said quietly to Marcus one evening. "No clarity, no vision." Greg returned not long after. Michelle reached out 6 weeks later. Each of them said the same thing in different ways. They hadn't left because they didn't believe in Novatech. They just didn't think we could survive. Now they knew better. And once they saw the reality inside Hayes, consulting missed deadlines, strained client calls, a product roadmap that barely functioned, they were ready to come back to something that worked. In honor of everything we'd made it through, I launched the Victoria Hayes Innovation Scholarship, named for my mother, awarded to female tech founders who dropped out of college to pursue original ideas. The first recipient was 20 years old, bright, direct, fiercely smart. She had left MIT after her first year to work on predictive modeling for climate risk. No formal degree, no company structure, just raw vision. I read her application on a Saturday morning and knew instantly. We flew her out for a visit in June, when she walked through our development floor and asked one of the engineers about memory optimization. Without missing a beat, I saw a familiar kind of focus in her eyes. Later, I handed her a small envelope with the scholarship confirmation inside. "This is for the people who see the world differently," I told her. She smiled. "That's the only way I know how to see it." Rachel and I had lunch with Diana the following week. We were sitting near the windows of a quiet bistro just a few blocks from our original shared workspace. "You're not just building a company," Diana said after hearing our latest numbers. "You're changing the narrative." I glanced across the table at Rachel. She raised her glass. "To Dropout," she said. Diana smiled. "To founders." Later that night, I stood by the glass wall of our new headquarters and looked out at the city. It wasn't lost on me that everything we had now, every inch of progress, came from the same sketch on the back of a napkin, the one that still hung framed behind my desk. Olivia poked her head into my office before heading out. "Anything else tonight?" I shook my head. "Get some rest. You've earned it." The office emptied slowly. I stayed behind. Just before midnight, an email came through from a known tech reporter. Subject line, "Follow-up on Hayes Consulting story." I opened it. A request for comment on internal reports showing that Hayes Consulting was in breach of contract with at least one major client. Zenith. No surprise there. The article had all but written itself 6 months ago. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled a folder from the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet and flipped to a page Isabella had given me. Still tucked into the corner was the sticky note she'd written, "Use this however you need to. Just don't let it go to waste." I read through the document again. The numbers hadn't changed. The loss margin had widened. And then with a steady hand, I slid the folder back into the drawer and closed it. We didn't need it anymore. The next day, Rachel brought in a box of new marketing materials. Inside were branded notebooks, updated one-pagers, and copies of our new internal mission statement. On the front page of every folder, trail creators, not trail followers. She handed me one and smiled. "You said it at Tech Forward. We just made it official." That afternoon, I walked the floor of our main dev center, checking in with different teams. Every desk was full. Every project dashboard had motion. People were focused but not tense, alert but not afraid. That's when it hit me. We weren't surviving anymore. We were building. 6 months after we finalized the Westfield rollout, I stood in the corner of our main conference room, watching as the newest members of our team set up for orientation. There were welcome kits on the table, rows of laptops charging along the wall, and a printed quote on the screen behind them. "Innovation belongs to those who see differently, not just those who are seen." It was one of my mother's. Rachel had found it scribbled in the margin of her old journal and turned it into our onboarding motto. I glanced around the room. Jessica was explaining our AI framework to a group of interns. Marcus was reviewing build cycles with the new product manager. Rachel was prepping slides for the next advisory board meeting. No one was looking at me. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't need them to be. Bradley hadn't reached out again. The last we heard, Hayes Consulting was restructuring quietly. The Zenith contract had been reassigned to another firm. A few former employees left the industry entirely. I didn't chase updates. We had too much to build. At home, I had cleared space on the bookshelf for a framed photo of Mom. Not the usual one from family vacations, but an old snapshot of us sitting cross-legged on the garage floor, wires and circuit boards spread out between us. We were both laughing, probably because whatever we'd built had caught fire or started sparking again. She always said failure was just information. You gather it, learn, and keep going. That's how I'd built Novatech, not by following a perfect path, but by learning through the hard turns, the disappointments, the people who said, "I'd never get this far." Diana calls it grit. Rachel calls it clarity. I think it's just remembering who you are when the world tries to tell you otherwise. The scholarship in my mother's name now has 5 recipients, all of them women who walked away from the traditional path to build something of their own. Last month, the youngest one, only 19, pitched her prototype for real-time flood prediction using AI-generated heat maps. I sat in the front row and let myself feel the quiet kind of pride Mom would have understood. We're not just developing technology anymore. We're building a different conversation around success. And somewhere along the way, I stopped needing to defend my seat at the table. I realized I had built the table, and it's open to anyone willing to create something new instead of copying something old. So, if you've ever been called too unconventional, too idealistic, or too different to succeed, maybe you're right where you need to be. Maybe the people who said you were doing it wrong just didn't know how far ahead you were looking. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of your own journey or someone you believe in, feel free to share it. And if you're walking a different path, I hope you keep going, because the world doesn't need more people fitting in. It needs more people brave enough to stand out.